Merry Christmas, Badgers. Sam Cooper here. Sadly, Bledge has been struck down with a bad case of the seasonal flu, so he'll have to listen to this episode from his sick bed. Since our last episode, we finally set up an Instagram page, so please make sure you give us a follow on there to keep up to date with the podcast. We're at Golf Badgers. There's been a slow end to the year with the podcast, but rest assured, we'll be back with a vengeance in the new year. We've got some wonderful guests joining us, and we're both looking forward to sharing their stories. This week, I've been joined by Zac Blair and Kye Goalby. I'm sure they're two names you'll be familiar with. Zac is a PGA Tour player with a great passion for architecture. He's well known for his dreams of building a golf course of his own, and, as you'll hear, is a few months away from realising that ambition when the tree farm opens in the spring. Kye Goalby is the man who has built it. He has grown up in the game with his father, Bob Goalby, winning the 1968 Masters tournament in dramatic fashion. His cousins, Jay and Jerry Haas, are still playing on the tour. Kye is one of the best known shapers in the game. Often working with Tom Doak, Kye has helped build Pacific Dunes, Sabonic, and Ballyneal, to name just a few. We're very grateful they gave up so much of their time just before Christmas to record this episode. So Merry Christmas, Badgers. We hope you enjoy episode 7, A Christmas Tree Farm. It would have been much better with Bledge, obviously, and I know you guys... Is it from the Outpost match that you guys got to know Bledge?
Yeah, that's where I met him.
You have a match with Deal, don't you? Which looks raucous.
You've never been?
Well, I mean, I've played plenty of matches at Deal, and it's always raucous. But knowing you guys a bit and certainly knowing what they're like, I can imagine that's a full send weekend when you go down there.
Yeah, there was a few guys that did full send plus a few levels, I think.
Yeah, they get after it.
When I met up with you guys when we played at St George's Hill, when was that? Was that this year or was that last year?
That was like 16 months ago or 14 months ago or something.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, living in a van kind of alters your perception of the passage of time, and I don't.
Every day's the same, man. You're at a golf course on a van, huh?
Of course, it was 16 months ago because it was before you started shaping at the tree farm.
Yeah, it was actually before we went to Deal. Also, I think we went down the next day, didn't we, Zac?
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Because it was Zac. Wasn't that the trip where your passport had expired and you had to do this crazy dance with the US government to get out of the country?
Yeah, exactly. I was in my bed and I woke up. Our flight was at like 8 o'clock, and one of the other guys going on the trip was here, and I remember waking up at like 4:30 or 5 o'clock to get ready to go, and kind of like looked on my app, and it was like entering your passport information, and I'm like entering it in, and it's telling me it's invalid, and I was just sitting in my bed going like, this has got to be a dream. Like there's no way. I just kept looking at my passport like it's gonna change, like that number's gonna change. It was so bad. I remember my friend woke up and he's like, where are your bags? And I was just telling him like, hey, I'm not going, man. Like my passport's expired. I'm kind of in a bad spot, so I'll take you to the airport.
Where did you go? Did you have to go to Atlanta? Did you fly to you went all over, didn't you?
Yeah, it was kind of a weird process, like the chicken or the egg, because you had to call the passport agency. There's, I don't know, 20 of them, in the States, but you had to have a flight to tell them when you were going before you could get a emergency meeting or whatever to go kind of take care of it. And so it was like trying to figure out where I could get a flight out that I could then cancel after I made the meeting, and then get the meeting, and then go get it done, and then get a new flight. And somehow I only ended up missing one round of golf, which
wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah, missed the round at Swinley Forest and couldn't make it up, unfortunately. But it was kind of crazy. But made it, so that was cool. Ended up going to Dallas.
So you got to Heathrow in the end. And Kye, had you guys been? Where did you play in the morning? Because you came straight off the plane, no sleep, played somewhere, and then it was round two when we played at St George's Hill, wasn't it?
I kind of think Zach and I might have played at Woking that morning. I'm not even sure.
Yeah, or actually maybe Warpleston. I don't know.
Warples
Yeah,
sounds.
I think you're right. Yep.
we played Woking a few days later. We skipped going to the Addington to play Woking because David Margolis was adamant that we go to Woking and check out a couple things.
I know Ryan Nodes is going to make you go over there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It looks like they're
He's a
doing a
Tree
great
Farm
job.
member. Yeah.
It's so cool, Kye. Have you not been?
No, huh?
No, you'd love it. Where else did you have on that? Because was it a research trip or is that just a bit of an excuse to go and have a few days playing some nice golf in the heathlands of Surrey? Or tell me how that itinerary came together because you played some great courses that week.
Yeah, well, it was definitely the Outpost Club was doing that match over there, and Will Smith had kind of mentioned there might be some room to take a couple of people, and I know early on in the project, I definitely had this fascination with Heathland golf and just the look and the feel of the land, everything like that, and um, I had talked to Kye, and asked if the tree farm kind of had any similarities to any of those places, and he had mentioned a few that there were some spots that had that look or that feel. So when the opportunity came to maybe be able to go over there and check it out before we started construction, I definitely kind of jumped at the opportunity, and it was great that Kye came along, and we had a bunch of people taking a look at some cool spots.
And we
We've
also got to go to Rye and a few other places that maybe aren't really exactly like the tree farm as far as land or sort of the type of golf course that it might, but you still can always steal something from almost anywhere.
Totally.
we've jumped way ahead in the story here, so allow me to circle back. Zach, why don't we start with you? So most people, I guess, will know you as pro golfer, the Butt Club, all of the great things that you do on social media. How did your golfing love start, and then how's it changed over the last 4 or 5, 6 years?
Yeah, I grew up around the game. My dad, played golf a little bit on tour, played in college, and then kind of owned and operated, a handful of golf courses, kind of was involved in some golf development stuff. So, I mean, I really just kind of grew up around all of it my whole life, especially, the playing side. So, um, I ended up getting pretty good and thought that it was, something that I wanted to pursue, which was really fun, on the professional side. And, I think I just was very lucky to see all of that stuff growing up. My dad was so great with kind of how he handled everything. And then again, I feel like I was pretty lucky my first handful of years on tour, kind of being invited and, being able to go to a lot of really cool places and see a lot of really great clubs and courses and meet a lot of great people. And yeah, that's kind of how it came about.
Would you say your love of architecture and the direction you've gone in now has that grown because of the more places you played on tour, or have you had frustrations playing golf and you think, you know what, I just love architecture so much, I'm going to go and build my own golf course?
I mean, it really kind of started again, kind of my first few years, I guess my rookie year on tour, just saw a lot of places that, were some of the best golf courses in the world that really kind of piqued my interest, and kind of started to learn more about that stuff. And that's where the idea, came to build my own golf course, or try, and tried for a long time to do it in Utah, and it didn't work out, and then had the opportunity to do this course out in South Carolina, which has been pretty awesome.
Amazing story. And Kye, we should ask you about your starts of life in golf, because you probably should have been a player with your extended family, direct family, everything. But you ended up on the back of a digger creating some of the best golf courses. So how did you get into it?
Well, you saw me play, so you know why I didn't end up playing. Now, it's funny, Zach and I kind of have a similar background in that his dad was around the game, played golf on the tour. My dad was the same thing. Um,
I
you
think
know,
your
I
dad might
followed
have
him.
been just a little better.
Maybe he had a little more success at that. He was fortunate to never really have a job, just play golf. But I traveled around with him when I was a kid a little bit. I told a story one time that I got in trouble with my mom, and we were living out in California, and she's like made me go with him for the week, and he was going to the at the time it was called the Bing Crosby up at Pebble Beach, the tournament at Pebble Beach. So they made me go up there. So I had to go hang out at Pebble Beach for a week with my dad, and his partner was this guy named Jim Garner that some older people would know. It was like listening to a show called The Rockford Files back in the 70s and 80s. And anyway, I got to go around with him, and I remember just wandering around inside the ropes of Cypress Point. It's like a 12-year-old going, "This is the coolest thing I've ever seen." And so stuff like that, it has to have an impact on you. And so anyway, I did try to play golf. I played in college, and I just was not that good. I had my cousins, the Haas's. Jerry Haas was in college with me and played the tour for a while, and his brother Jay Haas has played. I think Jay's 68 or 69 years old, and he's been playing since he was 22. 47 years on tour,
Wow.
traveling around playing. And so yeah, so I somehow missed the playing stuff, but I fortunately found the a passion for building golf courses.
That's great. If you have, walking around Cypress Point as a 12-year-old as a memory, I'm guessing you would have spent a little time at Augusta National post 1968. So those kind of places must just have such an indelible mark on you as an architect and as a designer and as a shaper and as everything that goes into it. It's got to have inspiration from somewhere, right?
Yeah, and I don't think when you're a 12-year-old you're really thinking about how would I build that or anything like that. But I don't know what sticks with you, but it definitely, I definitely had a lot of experience at Augusta, getting to go down there and hang out sort of inside the ropes. And I caddied there for my dad a couple of times once they allowed you not to have the club caddies. I don't even know if you're aware they used to only let the club caddies caddy for the players. I think in the mid 80s. I think about when Crenshaw won, maybe that was the first year they let guys bring their own caddies, and Ben actually still used the club caddy. But that was pretty cool. That was actually really cool getting the caddy in the Masters a couple of times.
It would be remiss not to ask your dad's success there, because that is such an interesting story. And I remember after he sadly passed earlier in the year, and you shared the beautiful letter that Bobby Jones wrote, which must be an incredibly treasured thing to have. What a touch of class by Bobby Jones.
Yeah, that was a very cool letter, and it's just like it's so well written, and just kind of got to the point. And so yeah, I said that again, and I don't even know where I said it, but when I was a kid, I would read that thing in my dad's office, and it's like, man, this is a really cool letter, and not really knowing who Bobby Jones was particularly or anything else. I just he was some guy that was really good, but didn't really know much. Um, but yeah, that was really cool. My dad, obviously, that meant a lot to him. Just that
Yeah.
Bobby Jones was kind of, let him know that you won this thing fair and square, and you played great golf. So
It's an amazing story. Would it be fair to say that it's the stuff that you've done with Tom Doak that you'd be best known for? Some of the courses you shaped.
yeah, that was the most well-known golf courses I've worked on for sure, and probably got a chance to learn more doing that than anything. I honestly didn't get into this to be a shaper. I got into it really because of my dad. He got a job helping some people were building a new golf course here where I grew up outside of St. Louis, and asked him who they should get. And he said, I can do it. And he was doing television at the time. He used to do TV in the United States for 20 years, golf announcing. And So he was gone a lot, and so I was working in Boston as a financial guy, and I was like kind of hating being in an office every day. And that came up, and I was like, I'm going to go do that. And so I quit my job that I had in Boston and went and started working with him. And I didn't know anything, but figured I knew a lot. But anyway, that course got built, and there was a boom time in the United States in the 1990s. I think there were 500 courses a year in the early 90s being built in the United States. So I literally was able to get a couple of jobs with another guy designing golf courses in St. Louis as a 26-year-old. And so during that time, trying to explain stuff to what were basically union construction guys that built roads and sewers and stuff, trying to explain them anything about building a golf course was, well, I guess that's as good as we can get. So I was like, I should try to do this myself. So I started getting on the dozer and started playing around on it. And I was pretty terrible at the beginning, but that's kind of how that started. I just started building my own stuff and built a golf course by myself one year, a year and a half. And then sort of figured out I didn't know everything. And that's when I reached out to some people, and Doak being one of them. And that was when Tom wasn't really well known then. And started working with Tom in the late 1990s.
Not an incredibly dissimilar story to some of the other guys that I've come across in the industry who go into a conventional form of business, accounting, finance, something, and then realize it's not really their passion and end up getting somehow into the golf world. Zac, it makes me wonder. There aren't many tour pros. Is it fair to say there aren't that many tour pros who have made the transition to architecture in the way that obviously Crenshaw is the epitome of someone who's done that, and I work with Mike Clayton, who's done a pretty good job of it. But it seems quite rare, actually, Zac, that guys from your line of work actually then go into building the kind of courses that we do love so much.
Yeah, I think, obviously, Kye would probably be able to talk about it a little bit more and, that whole sort of thing. But there's obviously that big group of people like Jack Nicklaus and Greg Norman and Gary Player. I don't know, like Arnold Palmer, the people that, yeah,
That's those
yeah.
guys.
So,
Honestly, they were as much real estate salesmen as they were golf architects. I mean, it was their name that people were playing off. It wasn't the
yeah,
golf courses they were building.
yeah, exactly. So, Kai was talking about that boom kind of in the 90s, so those guys, I think, were able to kind of, ride the coattails isn't the right, way to say it, but, Kai kind of said it. They were kind of building houses and building developments, and their name was kind of tacked on it, and they would go out and shake some hands and take some pictures and do that whole sort of thing. But I mean, there are some guys I think that do kind of like it and have, I don't know if a passion for it is like the right word, but people are getting more into it and, talking about it more, I think. And, you're seeing it a little bit with kind of people being a little bit more involved in some of this stuff. But, most of those guys are really good at golf and probably got a lot more time playing ahead of them.
I do think, Zach, like your era of guys in the tour, when Jack and Arnie were out playing, they were kind of my dad's era. There's nobody was really talking about architecture at all. Um,
Yeah.
it was sort of like people did. Like a friend of ours, Roger Null, who's a golf course superintendent, worked at a Donald Ross course in Iowa as a superintendent for 15 years. He didn't know who Donald Ross was, and he's really into golf architecture now. And he had no idea that he got a job in St. Louis to work at a Robert Trent Jones course, and was like, "This is going to be awesome. This guy Robert Trent Jones is great." And because at that time Trent Jones was publicizing himself, but no one knew. He didn't even know who Donald Ross was, and he worked on one of his golf courses. So
Yeah,
I think the
it's a lot
architecture.
easier now. A lot easier now to kind of understand and know the history and kind of learn about it and learn who some of these great architects were and just like the internet, right? You kind of your fingertips away from learning kind
For
of whatever
sure.
you want on paper.
Yeah, even
Yeah,
just to look at the books that have been written. I mean, there was a ton of books written in the 20s and 30s by all those golden age guys, but how many golf architecture books were written between then and 2000 when Tom wrote, the Confidential Guide? I mean, probably almost nothing. You know,
Yeah.
That's what I
And
find so crazy. It's like if you look even further back on our side of the water over in Britain, you've had dark ages and you've had periods of you've had golden ages, not just the golden age as we call it in the 20s and 30s and whatever, but like before that, if I talk about restoring golf courses over here, I think there's a perception, and Kai, you must have got this, but there's a perception that people just think, oh, you guys just think that golf was better in the past. And it's like, well, no, not necessarily. It's like, what past are you talking about? Like, a lot of the stuff that was done in the 1950s, well, that's in the past, but I'm not really interested in that. Yeah, I'm interested in stuff in the 1920s and 30s, but not because it's old, because I also wouldn't be interested in stuff from the 1890s, and that's older still. But I don't really want penal Victorian architecture to come back in the same way that I don't want Robert Trent Jones, narrow fairways, and stick the bunkers either side, and all that kind of stuff. So, do you do you find that it does go in like waves? And if you look back over the evolution of things, we are going through another wave, and the stuff that you've been able to do over the last 20, 25, 30 years in the States, over the last 15, 20 years they've been doing in Australia, especially in Melbourne, and the stuff that now is starting to happen in Britain over the last 10, 15 years, there's a lag, but it's now, as you say, Zach, it's sort of entering the mainstream a bit more, and undoubtedly the internet and social media is capturing a bit of imagination from it.
I mean, yeah, I think you're definitely. Yeah, I think anything you do, people. There are these waves where it gets to a point where it's really good, and then it just, whether it's financial crisis, recessions, like whatever, things go down and go the other way, and then you have to have somebody come back and kind of fix them, and that can either go good or bad. And I think a lot of the times it went bad for a while, and then people fix it again, and it's getting back to where they're fixing them in a good way or building them in a good way.
Kai, I bet over your career to date, the kind of stuff that you've been building over the last 15 years is a bit different to the stuff you were building in the first 15 years of your career.
um, the stuff I did when I was on my own, there was like people I learned from. They were building mounds and things like that on the sides of fairways. I don't know. You guys probably didn't get a lot of that in Britain, where the seemed like a lot of the real estate golf courses. Honestly, they would kind of just push all the dirt out to the side and build the moundy kind of stuff on the edges. So the first guys I worked with were kind of showing us that kind of thing. So we did a little bit of that, but honestly, the stuff I was doing early was really low budget. So you kind of had to figure out how to do stuff without moving a lot of dirt. And I had no idea that was minimalism at the time. It was just the only option we had. Um, so to be honest, it's kind of, I've been doing more or less similar stuff. You mean you learn something all the time as you're going along, so you get different ideas, but it's always been based on that sort of traditional, we use the term a couple of times here today, golden age stuff, but it's always sort of been based on that. Um, working with Tom, got a little more freedom to do a little wilder greens and kind of got accustomed to some of that. But really, I don't think it's changed that much in the 30 years I've been doing it, kind of the style of things we've been building.
Okay, so on to the dream, Zach, that you're turning into reality. I guess did that start with the Buck Club first time round and your original idea for doing something over in Utah?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's been a lot of things from that initial kind of dream of building that in Utah that have carried over. Um, I think, we tried to do it for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, and just kind of kept hitting hurdles and roadblocks. And I think the initial vision or dream of TBC in Utah was like private destination, golf course. Yeah, so I never built a golf course or a club or anything, so I didn't understand a lot of the stuff. So I was just kind of learning on the fly. Was hitting some roadblocks and hurdles, and eventually kind of shifted away from it being this private destination thing because we saw so much support from people all over that I knew that it wasn't realistic that all of these people would be able to stroke a check to be a part of what I wanted to build in Utah. So it kind of shifted into more of a public, lot of accessibility type vision, but I still had all those dreams and ideas on the private destination side. So when we kind of finally figured out like, hey, this property's not going to work in Utah, started looking some other places, and I had a few friends that had done some stuff in South Carolina around Aiken, and knew how big golf was. They got the Masters just down the road. They got some really cool places. It's kind of golf's in their blood around that part of the country, I guess, if you will. And so just started looking at properties online, in that area, and found, a few places. And I'll never forget, I was in my living room on my couch when COVID was like full swing, no one going anywhere, and everything shut down. And I remember just calling up one of my friends and being like, dude, let's get on a plane, let's go check out this property. Like we might as well do it now. Like it couldn't be a better time to go check it out. And saw the property and thought like, we could take a lot of the things we were initially thinking with TBC and do it here. You're a lot closer to a lot of people on the East Coast. The seasonality aspect of it was a lot better. You could pull people out of the snow and come play in the winter. And, a lot of the things started to make sense. And luckily found, a lot of people that were passionate about it like me, and, kind of hit the ground running.
Zach, was your story you're telling there? You've mentioned to me before, and I'm not even 100% sure of the details, but you were saying you literally were just doing like a Google search for like stand property, and that's how you found the land literally online.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know at that time like how else you could find it, right? I was like just looking on land websites, 200 to 500 acres, like sandy soil, pulling up kind of ranches and other properties, just kind of all along the East Coast and just over that way. Um, and yeah, that's how I found it. I mean, the property was listed on like a handful of, websites, and would just kind of look at the pictures and see the map and see where it was. And people think that's so wild, and but I didn't even know how else you could find property.
Crazy. It's like, how does that work for permitting and everything? Because in Britain, it's not quite the case of, oh, there's some cool land there, let's go and build a golf course on it. Like, imagine you had a few hoops to jump through before it became a golf course, at
I mean,
least
the
on paper.
property was yeah, the property was permitted for kind of like whatever. So didn't have to get it rezoned or anything, didn't have to do much. And, Aiken County, up to this point at least, have been very, positive about the project. And, they do love golf kind of around there. And it's been nice kind of working with them, and thankfully so far at least a lot of the stuff has worked out.
Yeah, different areas of the United States, Sam, are a lot different for getting permits and things like that to do construction. Aiken County, South Carolina, is a lot different than Marin County, California, or Long Island around New York, or something like that. So
Yes.
some places are a
Yeah.
little easier to build things.
Forgive my lack of knowledge on the geography, but is it something like 30, 50 miles from Augusta, or is that
Yeah,
about?
it's probably 40 miles, just straight east, basically. You just leave Augusta, hop on I-20, and keep driving till exit 33, and you're there.
Amazing. So, did you start the process with Rob Collins, who obviously I guess you got to know him from the Ringer and everything that you did at Sweetens Cove, which is somewhere I've not been, but I guess in the early days of the book club, and the ideas there, Sweetens seemed like a bit of a spiritual home from home for you for a while.
Yeah, it was definitely somewhere that we had fun. It was it was a place that I had had a couple of events and got to know Rob. And they were, they were kind of the people tasked with doing TBC when the plan was to do it out in Utah. So I had had that relationship with them, and then when we found this property in Aiken, it was kind of that weird, is this TBC? Are they going to be the ones building it? And I had had, I'm not the only one, you know, building this thing, financially. So there were definitely other people involved that, deserved, their input was something that I was kind of listening to, and I had people helping me out, that had been involved in developing golf courses and been involved in projects like this, that were kind of just like, I think you ought to at least entertain kind of bringing some other people in and checking the property out, whatever. So it was definitely like this really awkward, unfortunate situation, for me, especially because Rob and Tad had been, people that I had talked to a lot, and we were hoping to do this thing out in Utah, and I had to kind of break the news, hey, we're kind of going to look a different direction, or at least kind of talk to some other people. And I wanted to be courteous enough to let them know before I started talking to other people, so it wasn't like me going behind their back. And so yeah, it was kind of a muddy couple of weeks, and but it all turned out good. They got a lot of cool stuff going on, and I got to link up with Kye and Tom and build a really cool place.
Course. So I remember you saying a story when we played of you had a bit of a routing headache, and you suggested Tom might be interested in.
Well, yeah. So
Yeah.
Will Smith, a mutual friend, somebody that's very involved in the project, um, had was hosting a handful of people down at a Hoopy Match Club, and Kye was picking me up from the airport, and I had never met him. And so Kye picks me up, and we have this 2 or 3 hour
And I
drive.
was actually just in Atlanta playing golf at Peachtree, and Will actually called me, "Hey, Zach doesn't have a ride down. Can you give him a ride?"
So I had met Kye one time up at Oakland Hills when he was doing that project up with Gil. Um, you know, that year. So I had briefly met him for like 10 minutes. So anyways, he picks me up, acts as, my Uber driver down to Hoopy, and I'm in this process at that point of, you know, trying to build this golf course. So it was really cool to, pick his brain for 2 or 3 hours, and he was probably so annoyed. I was asking everything, how, like what makes a project like great to work for, like all these things, and you could immediately tell like how passionate he was about golf and about working on cool projects. And that's kind of, it seemed, all he cared about was working on really cool projects. He didn't care, if it was him building it or his name or where it was. It was just like he cared about, he had this really, really big passion for just being involved in really great golf courses. So it was a really cool drive for me to kind of hear all these things. And I think right after that was kind of, we had spent a few days down at a Hoopy, and he was actually going to come up to the tree farm and kind of look at the property. After we had kind of had a nice couple of days, we invited him up there. So he came out and looked at it, and I think he was again nice enough to kind of lend a hand and say, hey, like if you guys are looking for somebody, I would love to help out, whatever that kind of looks like. And I mean, I jumped all over that and thought it was kind of a perfect situation with all the places that he had been involved in and all the great places he had seen, and his passion kind of felt like it was very would kind of mesh very well with what I was looking for. Because I think early on, for sure, I was, wanting to be very involved in the whole process of everything, the routing, the designing, just all of it. And I think when I had had my routing kind of done that I had worked on, and we took him up there, and he was kind of like, "Yeah, this is probably gonna need a little bit of work." It's very kind of taking things head on, I think was kind of how he described it, taking the topography head on, and he had suggested like maybe we, mellow it out a little bit and kind of, tackle things kind of diagonally. And so I think me and him worked on it, um, kind of, holes back and forth and a lot of ideas, and
Yeah, I
the
think I
route.
just was actually going through some photos, Zach, and I was like pulled up a bunch of photos that I sent you because we were sending those photos of the routings back and forth, and I was like, "Holy crap, there's a lot of photos in here." And
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
think we spent what 5 weeks, 6 weeks, kind of hashing around different things.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, Kai and him, as much as anyone that kind of knew, was kind of like, all right, this is something you can't really do over, right? Like we got to get the routing right. The property, I think Kai knew it was cool and had some exciting stuff going on, but there were definitely spots that you could kind of get in trouble if you did the wrong thing, and that was definitely something we didn't want to do. So he had kind of suggested, maybe we should reach out to Tom. Like, this is what he loves doing. Like, he loves routing golf courses. He's as good as anybody in the world, if not, the best at kind of tackling these problems. So maybe you should just reach out to him. And, that's kind of how that came about. I had never talked to Tom at all, and never met him or anything, and kind of remember calling him asking if he would want to be involved in it, and it was, you know, kind of went on from there.
The obvious question then is, if Kai got you to play across some of the contours rather than going straight up them, how did it then change when Tom got involved?
Well, I thought that was, one of the coolest parts about the whole process. He kind of, said I could look at your routing and suggest a few things. I could like give you 4 or 5 holes on the map that I think uh, are really good holes, and you could kind of piece it together from there, or I could, do a whole routing. And to me, that was kind of like a no brainer. You might as well have, him do the routing, and then we can kind of work on it together. So he kind of, he didn't want to see mine or have any like preconceived ideas of what I was trying to do, I guess, and probably mine was probably just terrible, and he was, you know, didn't want to see any of that.
Now, as you
So
know, Zach, though, if once you see something, like if he would have seen something, some holes would stick in your head, and you'd start thinking you
yeah,
have to maybe do that, and it's really hard to get that out of your head.
Hard
totally,
to
totally,
unsee. Yeah, it's hard to
yeah,
unsee a puzzle when you've already half solved it, isn't it?
yeah. So it was honestly around this time, probably. I don't know if it was 2 years ago, or it was probably 2 years ago, right around Christmas, or maybe 3 years ago. And
It was
he was
actually we met him down there in February of 21.
okay.
So that was basically
December
probably this
2020.
time of 20. Yeah.
So
So
3 years
2 years
ago.
ago. This is
Um,
just 22.
oh gosh, yeah, yeah, sorry. Yeah. So a couple of years ago, and he was just kind of sending me snippets and little like sneak peeks of certain holes. And I remember I would sit there when he would send me a little shot of like 4 or 5, and I could see a little bit of where 6 was teeing off, and I was trying to loop it together. And I've got a map somewhere of like, I had seen his 13th hole, and I was like, man, where's he gonna go with 14? And so it was cool kind of seeing, him plot along and um, you know, do his whole process. And it was actually like Christmas Eve, like 2020, he kind of had texted me and was, said something like, maybe Santa will like, leave you a routing tomorrow, for Christmas.
Wow.
So that was cool. That was the first time it was, I think it was on Christmas a couple of years ago, first time I had seen his initial, routing that he put together. And then obviously from there, me and Kai and Tom, tweaked a lot of stuff, and made a bunch of changes on site when we were all together. And touched it up to where it is now.
Because that
You
feels
know,
like the next
Zach's
stage.
not really giving himself enough credit, Sam. He had some major input and some alterations that were done to the routing that actually made the golf course a lot better. I mean, it still was good the other way, but it made it easier to walk, and we got to use some more interesting pieces of property that we didn't get to go to on Tom's original routing.
Okay, so it's going to be a Doak, Goalby, Blair, all three contributing to the final routing.
Yeah, I honestly didn't have as much to do with the routing as those two did. I was just kind of I had some ideas on Tom's routing of some spots, and the next morning we came out. We were there for a couple of days, and I had fiddled with some sketches and got out. And Zach, as soon as we got out there the next morning, Zach showed me what he had some ideas. Like, don't need mine. Kept it right in the back pocket. So
Brilliant.
it was so I didn't have that much to do with the routing, honestly. And
That must be
my
cool,
part
Zach.
was
That must be cool to feel like you have not only got it off the ground to start with, but then actually contributed to it all the way through the process.
Yeah, well, I had spent a lot of time out on the site, and Tom had done most of his stuff, from like a topo map, and Kai had been out there, a couple of times, but hadn't really, visited every place, uh, y- you know, inside the property, and
and it
I
was
kind of,
also really hard to see. It was completely covered in trees. I mean, you couldn't
yeah.
see 50 feet past you most of the time just because it was so wooded. So it's hard to
So
get
there
to
were
know.
definitely areas that, I had kind of said, "Hey, could we do something here? Could we get a green or hold down here?" And on the map, it just didn't really look like you could. And when we went down there and walked in certain, some of those spots like 18 green or 11 green, it was kind of evident that, yeah, maybe you could do something cool down here, and that's what we ended up doing, which, yeah, it was definitely fun, and it was cool to just be involved in the whole process.
So that's the next question then in the evolution of the routing. Um, my colleagues Clates and DeVries are building a course over in Tasmania at the moment, and it's amazing duneland, 7 Mile Beach. But it was likewise, it was completely covered in trees, non-indigenous stuff, just planted to shore up sand dunes and provide timber. But as as they were taken away, the routing that they had originally has tweaked and changed as something that you couldn't really see before has been unearthed by just making it visible, really. So did the similar process occur there? Would the routing change slightly or a bit or a lot even when you got some of the timber off site and realized, oh, actually, another 20 yards behind where we were looking, there's a really cool feature that we hadn't really appreciated before, perhaps.
I think there were a few little things, six green comes to mind, like, the green scooted back, like you said, 20 yards or something like that, or, the fourth green shifted a little to the right to get more on the ridge. But for the most part, the property's not like sand duney, you know, pockets of stuff where you're going to sit there and go like, wow, if we go over there, you're going to have this green site that's just sitting there that you just kind of spin it off and, seed the grass. So I don't think there were a ton of things that we tweaked like majorly when the trees were down. I think most of the major tweaks came like pre-clearing, but stuff shifted 10, 15 yards. But Kai would probably have a better idea of all the actual changes that took place.
Yeah, no, Zach's right. That most of it happened before the trees were down. The stuff that happened when the trees were down is again, it's probably like Clates and Mike are down and stuff in Tasmania dealing with. It's you get an idea for a green. There's something there. Hey, a couple of bunkers might be better over there than what we thought over here, or let's take the bunker out and use that little roll. We made a lot of adjustments. Just the shapes and the features in the ground are kind of determined out in the field, but we didn't really move stuff after the trees were gone.
So that brings us full circle then to where we started off our chat and when we met up over on the heathlands of Surrey. Is that the kind of topography that the tree farm shares. There's what we would call Heathland golf, and do you have a great deal of that in America, or is it a relatively rare thing to have such sandy, rolling soil?
I think we have a lot of it, but no, we don't have any heathlands that I know of in the United States. Do you know exactly anywhere that there's heathlands? I mean,
Yeah, probably not in South Carolina. There are other there are some really good golf courses that have land that has similar stuff, ridges and big valleys and movement like we have out at the tree farm. And I think that's why it was intriguing and why I thought it always could be so cool because the land was cool. That was like first and foremost. Even with the trees up early on, there were places that you could get a feel out there that like, whoa, this is really cool. It obviously helped a lot when you took everything down and you could see, what you were looking at without a bunch of stuff in the way. But the land kind of first and foremost uh, was pretty neat and had some cool features. I had never been over to any of the Heathland golf courses. I had just seen pictures, and everyone knows pictures don't always tell the full story or whatever. But there were definitely pictures I looked at when I would look at Sunningdale or St. George's Hill or whatever, and kind of be like, wow, like could we do something like that on one, or could we do something like that on 13, like whatever it was. That was kind of the idea.
Because a lot of those Heathland courses, they started their lives, dare I say, looking a little bolder than some of them look nowadays. You think of that famous image of St George's Hill in 19, oh, I should know that 1927 maybe, with the green, the bunker cutting into the green on the eighth, or some of the bunkers that Colt built on the Sunningdale, and they're just so bold, dramatic, big shapes. And now, perhaps 100 odd years later, they're a little more conservative in places. So when you were looking at those images, Zac and Kye, you were talking about the types of shapes and things you wanted to build on a large scale property. Was it some of the black and white images you were looking at, or is it a Heathland style or British style, but with an American flavour to it, of being a bit bigger and a bit bolder than some of the things that we see over here?
now, first off, it's really hard to get much bolder than that picture you're talking
Yeah.
about. And we actually tried sort of to do a hole like that with the similar bunker on our Zach's first hole in the routing, which is something that changed from Tom's original routing, where it's a par five is a par three. And we were trying to get something looking like that St. George's Hill hole and just couldn't make it work just quite with our lands a little different. The angle we're playing is a little different. And so we tried to do something of our own that wasn't a copy of that. But I mean, it's still, that hole is really bold, and just trying to, you know, do an American more, let's go bigger than that. We weren't really trying to do that. It's like, if we could build something as cool as something Harry Colt did, we did a good job.
Cool. Okay, so you got the routing, you got the trees off, you've got the shapes and the ideas in mind. There's a good friend of mine who got involved as well. Ben Warren, he helped shape with you, Kye. Is that right?
Yeah, Ben was around for about 3 or 4 months helping shape.
Do you have a Redan Green on the property that did Ben shape that one as a North Berwick guy, or did I?
Ben was,
misremember?
I actually built it, but Ben was around when we were doing it, and we talked about what was at North Berwick. Um, some of the things that at North Berwick people might not sort of realize are going on with that green, but we don't weren't really trying to copy any certain Redan green. But I was actually my shaping there.
Kai shaped all the greens.
Bear with me for a moment, because Bledge sent me some questions through, and I want to make sure we've covered them. Otherwise, I'm going to get in trouble afterwards. Bledge wants to know how you have time to do it. How you have time to do it, Zac. Between the tour, two young kids and building a golf course, starting the club, and all of the things that go with the membership model and everything else. Will it be a relief when it's open, and will you get more time, or do you think you'll have less time when it's actually realized?
I mean, it was an interesting time. At the start of it, I only have one kid, and I was hurt. So I had a lot of free time. With one hand while my shoulder was kind of in a sling or whatever. So I had a lot of time that I couldn't golf. 2 years basically that I was out. So I was fortunate to have a lot of people around me that, A, my wife put up with it, and B, a team that, really helped kind of with anything I needed, whether it was Kye on the golf side of things or, Colin Sheehan, Will Smith, John Shimp, David Margolis on the club side of things were people that were, very involved kind of every day, chatting about the ideas and how we actually, can get a membership and how we can get these founders and how we can, raise the money to build the place. So I had a lot of people, the whole step of the way that kind of helping out and guiding me through the whole thing. But I'll definitely be happy when it's all said and done and the course is kind of open and the verticals are up. But it is cool, the golf's done. Like you can go play 18 holes. I think Kai and Robert Nelson and the grounds crew and everybody still doing a bunch of tweaking to the edges and kind of blending everything back in and tying all the details together. But yeah, I mean, it definitely was cool, like playing that first round of golf, going like, okay, like we did it.
Did it? Wow. Because you were playing it before there was any grass on the on the thing. Those videos of you playing to bare earth and things. But that must have been cool. How often did you try and get down there, and did you notice a
During
change?
construction, during when they were building it, I would try and get down like 2 times a month, basically. So, would try and get down for 2 or 3 days at a time and kind of look at some stuff, check things out, and then as the course got further along and, started grassing and there were less things to, you know, tweak or have input on, it was kinda like once a month. So, I would say once or twice a month for the last 2 years was how much I was kinda getting down there.
And you've gone from obviously having such a passion of the architecture and playing a big role in that, as you've gone through all of the growing and everything else, is the agronomy and all of that side, is that something you've taken as much interest in, or do you let those guys sort of get on with it?
Yeah, I mean, I know kind of enough about some of it to hold a conversation with somebody if they ask, but I don't know. I don't know enough about it to really y- you know, hold a candle to somebody that's actually doing it. So again, luckily we have a really good superintendent, Nick Roth, who again Kai was very helpful in kind of linking me up with him, and he's down there kind of taking care of the grass side of it, which has been great. I mean, talk about somebody who is like the hardest worker I've ever seen. Um, him and Kai, for 2 years now or whatever, a year and a half like out there all day, putting their kind of blood, sweat, and tears into that place. So it's been pretty cool to see, how passionate and how much those guys care about it.
Yeah, I'm at home at Christmas, and Nick's probably out there working today. So
Now he's
he works
he's
harder than.
driving. He's driving today. He's
Oh, is
driving
he?
up home. Yeah. So
Okay.
You've let them off
Yeah.
duty, Zach, for for the Christmas period.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Sam, you were talking to him about like if he was going to be relieved when this was done or something to that effect. And
yeah,
Zach, the one thing he's got, I mean, it's not the one thing, but one of his major, just what makes this possible for him is level of energy he puts into stuff is just I mean, it's full on all the time, and he's just never worn out, never tired, and just always going and always excited about things. And you're talking about the maintenance aspect and learning about agronomy and he's got a really good ability to ask questions, not think he knows all the answers, but is a quick learner. And just if you're passionate about something, as you well know, you can learn about it a lot quicker than if you don't really give a damn. And so he's got a lot of passion for this, and he's learning, but he's smart enough to kind of know what he doesn't know. But at the same time, he's got a pretty good grasp of all that's going on. And
Is that
a lot of people that do this, they think they have all the answers, or they just are aloof to it, figuring somebody's going to figure this out for them. And there's both ends of those don't necessarily work too well. So Zach's done a great job of kind of being involved in everything on this project, from me watching from a distance and kind of keeping it moving.
does that work, or does that help you as well, Kye, as the guy spearheading the actual building of it, to have a guy that you're reporting to, I guess, who's actually does care and does come along and show the enthusiasm and can see the progress and see the things that you've been putting all of those blood, sweat, and tears into producing.
No, he definitely, sometimes you build stuff and for a client and they have no idea what you've just done. And so that's a very cool part about working with him. But I think both of us have really enjoyed, just kind of being golf nerds about this stuff and just I don't know. My wife loses her mind sometimes because it's like 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and we're still texting about different. Oh, what if we like move this, this bump over here 6 feet or whatever. And so that's actually been a lot of fun for me, and I think it's fun for Zach because he can't stop either.
No, Kai will be more relieved when it's all done, that he won't have to put up with me, sending him pictures and asking him if we should move something over here, expand the bunker. He'll be excited to be, to the next place where he doesn't have to deal with
Yeah.
that.
No, I won't. It'll be sad to actually be kind of a bummer to stop doing this.
Oh, well, what an indictment then, Zach, to have someone say that about you. I can imagine, Kye, there are a few clients or a few projects you've worked on over the years where you've been perhaps glad to see the end of them, but clearly this isn't one of those.
No, no, I was just thinking the other day, it's going to be a drag when, because we're kind of coming up to, I'm going to do some work the next couple of months, kind of getting some, as Zach said, the outside sort of dialed in and looking good. But really, at that point, we kind of turn it over to Nick and his guys, and then Zach playing golf like a preview play, basically starting in March. And so there's going to be golfers out there, they know it's not 100% ready, but it's close. And so that's pretty much when it becomes, your baby's somebody else's now. And Zach will take care of it though.
Hopefully Nick and everybody else will take care of it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it though. Definitely. I don't know. Sometime in November, I think there was a day where we kind of had this autumn meeting with a bunch of the founders and the members, and it was 13 through 18 was open, and it was pretty sweet, like seeing like groups of people playing golf, and because we spent a lot of time on the theater aspect of it, and people seeing other people's shots on other holes, and coming seeing different parts of the routing, and seeing your friends below you or above you, or way out in the distance or whatever. So it was really really cool that first time kind of seeing 5 or 6 groups out there at the same time, and being like, wow, this is kind of what we were hoping it would be.
Coming to life as well, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
so everything you've learned, Zach, over the trying to start out in Utah and then moving over to South Carolina and now it being almost there, will you be looking for another project to put everything you've learned, or do you think, you know what, this is it? I've done it. I've achieved my dream that I set out to achieve, which is to build my own golf course, and I'm just going to sit back and enjoy it, or do you think there's another one out there?
We'll definitely want to do TBC in Utah still. I don't think it'll be nearly the undertaking that this was, kind of taking a raw piece of land and building a golf club on it, not a golf course. So that scale of it, I don't know, when I'll ever do that again. I would like to and think that I've learned a lot from the project, but more importantly, met people that know, those certain areas, and would be able to call on them, like Kye's a great example. You know, now seeing somebody do it and kind of knowing all that goes into it, I know that I can't do it all by myself. So, the having those people kind of in your corner, is really good. So I don't know if I'll ever do this sort of thing again, but I would like to. I think it's been pretty fun.
It's been fun to watch it, and that's one of the cool things as well. I don't think there have been many golf courses in history that have been basically live streamed on Instagram for all of us golf nerds around the world to actually get to see it come to life. So thank you for thank you for letting us all live vicariously through your cell phones.
Yeah, no, that was definitely one of the things, while we were building it. I'm very like, I like to see the whole process and I like kind of showing people, the process because they don't ever see that. And, I knew from trying to do TBC, like people think you just snap your fingers and there's a golf course and a clubhouse and a staff and a membership and everything, just kind of appears overnight basically. And that's what they see as the finished product. So it was definitely cool kind of like keeping tabs of everything and, seeing how the 13th hole kind of evolved and seeing, the greens go from nothing to something and then grass on them. And, I know Kye was definitely like, hey, we don't always like show all of this stuff. Like, is it okay if someone's taking a picture of this? Like, if you post that, you're going to have to tell them it's not done. And, so it's been a learning process for me too, but it's been fun.
Well, you're right. People don't appreciate how much hard work goes into it. Don't realize how many hours Kye spends out there every day. I mean, Kye, have you put an estimate together on how many hours you've spent on the back of a dozer out on the property, just making it the golf course as it is?
I have no idea how many hours, but I mean, it's pretty much, I think, post when we were with you over in England, I think October 16th or 17th, got back and I went down to Aiken and I literally lived in Aiken up until a couple months ago every day. And then I just was back for another month. So I don't know. I've spent 12 of the last 14 months there and pretty much, and it's not just me. There was the guys helping me were, we wore them out. Like you talked about Nick Roth, we had Matt Smallwood with me and Eamon Sullivan and Benny was there for a while. But I mean, those guys, I don't think we ever took a day off. Worked 7 days a week, 12, 14 hours a day. So, and honestly, that's not unique to this job. It kind of happens on any of them. And if it's going to be any good, we talked about the routing, you got to get it right. Well, if we don't get this other part right, it costs a lot of money to get it right later. And, you know, there's no excuses if you don't get it right. So the time matters.
I'm sure it's been time well spent. Look, guys, I could talk to you all night, but it's Christmas soon, and I know that you've got families and things to get to. So we're enormously grateful that you spent the time talking to our little podcast. Bledge is very sorry that he's missed this one, but he'll probably be able to listen to it from his sick bed as he recovers from his man flu. So I guess just thanks so much for taking the time and have the best Christmas, and hopefully we'll get to see you both next year, perhaps.
Sounds
Yeah,
great.
you'll
I
have to
got a
come
couple.
over. You'll have to come over and play. Get you out of the tree farm.
That would be nice.
Yeah, do a tour of all the courses in America.
Yeah, I've got to sell that one to Harriet. I think that one might be that might be a thicker book than the one I'm already working on. So it'd be a good
there's only like 400 or 500 of those type 600. It's no big deal.